The Rhode Island game should be a blowout, but can Minnesota break its typical trend? We'll dive in today.
You are Locked On Golden Gophers, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Gopher fans? You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk Golden Gophers with you each and every day of the week, Monday through Friday. We're back at it 5 days a week, so be sure to hit subscribe over on YouTube or follow wherever you get your podcasts at Locked On Golden Gophers to make sure you're tapped in for Gophers daily content. Now we're breaking down every single Gophers opponent in these next 12 shows. Yesterday we did North Carolina. Today we're covering the week 2 opponent in Rhode Island. We'll talk about all the changes they've had. We'll talk about the personnel they have, then their strengths and weaknesses, and the make or break for the game. But before we do that, I do want to talk about transfer portal quarterbacks in the Big Ten, because they are taking over. They are making a claim to the Big Ten, and will they be able to change the narrative? Will they be able to break the mold when it comes to Big Ten quarterback play? Because we know that the landscape is changing in the Big Ten, but could the QB stigma also shift with that landscape change? Only school that has had some love in the quarterback department over the last few years has been Ohio State, plain and simple, at least when it comes to a consistency basis. Now, everyone else has been crapped on by the outside world for years. Now, there's been exceptions to the rule here and there. You've got JJ McCarthy with Michigan prior to, or these last couple of years. You've had other exceptions to the rule here and there, but overall, it's been a lot of Ohio State or mediocre quarterback play. Now enter 2024, where there are 18 Big Ten teams, and of those 18 teams, 14 of them have a quarterback who has transferred at some point in their career to be their starter for the next year. That's 78% of the teams within the Big Ten have a quarterback who has transferred and will likely start for their team. Now, of those 14 teams, 13 of them have that transfer happen in either this past year or this upcoming offseason to head into this year. So who are all the different potential transfer starters for this upcoming season? We're talking about Mike Wright, who goes to Northwestern via Vanderbilt. You've got MJ Morris, who's going to Maryland via North Carolina State. Curtis Rourke going to Indiana from Ohio. Ethan Kaligmanis going to Rutgers from Minnesota. The only one going Big Ten to Big Ten in this current offseason. Then you've got Max Brosmer coming from New Hampshire to Minnesota. Cade McNamara going from Michigan to Iowa. That happened a year ago, but another one of those Big Ten to Big Ten switches. Tyler Van Dyke going from Miami to Wisconsin. Luke Altmaier going from Ole Miss to Illinois. Ethan Garber going from Washington to UCLA, even though that happened in 2020. So he's been in UCLA for a while. He is the exception to the 14 quarterbacks, 13 of them being in the last offseason or this offseason. He is the one exception to that rule. Now, Aiden Childs goes from Oregon State to Michigan State. Hudson Card went from Texas to Purdue last offseason. Will Rogers goes from Mississippi State to Washington. Will Howard goes from Kansas State to Ohio State. And Dylan Gabriel goes from OU to Oregon. Now, if you're looking at all of that, you're like, man, it might have been just easier for you to mention the 4 quarterbacks who haven't been in the transfer portal at some point. And that is Penn State's Drew Allar, who started as a freshman with Penn State, didn't start on the field, but started at that school, ended up starting as a redshirt freshman last year, I believe, and then redshirt sophomore year coming up this year. Alex Orji has been with Michigan the whole time, has not started yet, had a couple in-game moments last season, but he is looking to possibly be the starter this year. You've got Dylan Raiola, who is a true freshman for Nebraska, and then Miller Moss, who will be starting for the first time for USC. Now, all 4 of those, actually, of those 4, 3 of them have not officially been a starter for more than a game here or there for their teams. The only one person that has been homegrown and been a starter for at least a full season for their team in the Big Ten is Drew Allar at Penn State. That is quite a difference in college football. That goes to show you how crazy the landscape has been. Now, not only does it show that it's been insane and chaotic in college sports as of late, but it also makes it extremely difficult to predict success because we have seen transfers explode and be majorly for the better in their careers because they've found the right system, found the right home, found the right coach to believe in them, the right coach to develop them. You've seen that even last year to an extreme with Bo Nix, Jaden Daniels, Michael Penix, all three being Heisman finalists and one winning the Heisman, all coming from different programs where they were on the outs of sorts. But we have also seen for many, many years where it doesn't work out, where they don't keep the job full time, where it doesn't turn into everything you hoped and more. So it's all about the program fit. It's all about the development. That is where it comes to. So just because we have all of these 14 transfers at some point doesn't mean they're all going to hit. Now, we've had a couple of these transfers. Like I said, Luke Altmaier, Cade McNamara, who else was in there? Hudson Card. They were all in the Big Ten last year and they got their feet wet and the expectations were high and they didn't necessarily live up to them in full force. Cade McNamara got hurt. Hudson Card definitely had an up and down year. Luke Altmaier looked like he could be a very big rushing threat, but didn't really show consistency in the pass game. So overall, it's still a question mark around all three of those names. Now you have a ton of names beyond them looking to make their mark. And could it take a year or could they have found their right fit right away and click fast, a la Bo Nix or what have you? So overall, the quarterback landscape is crazy. So not only could this have a major effect on the be a major factor for the middle teams in the Big Ten to try and separate, to try and create a little distance for themselves in the top part of the conference, but it also could be the reason for an unexpected loss for some of the big dogs, for like your Michigan, your Wisconsin, your Ohio State. Maybe the quarterback isn't all there, is still getting up to speed or what have you early in the season, and they mess around and drop a game or so. That could be a scenario that doesn't absolutely shock you if it doesn't work out to a T. So the fit is huge. The development is huge. And we will see if the QB instability could cause defending national champions Michigan some problems. We'll see how it all plays out. So the transfer portal is a major player in the Big Ten quarterback space, and we will see if so many new starting faces could be the answer to a conference that was once ridiculed at the position, or if it will be more or less of the same. Now, QB inexperience, like I said, is huge in this conference. Only 5 of the 18 teams will have a quarterback that is quarterback starting that has started more than 1 or 2 games in the Big Ten. That's Drew Allar, that's Hudson Card, that's Ethan Caligmanis, Luke Altmaier, and Cade McNamara. And like I said, it's a big bag of mixed results in that one. So overall, we'll see. It's a big question mark. Could it be for the better or will it be more of the same? That's the biggest question with the transfer space and the quarterbacks in the Big Ten. We'll see if any of the narratives, whether for a program or for the conference, end up changing. But today we're going to focus on the Gophers' Week 2 opponent in Rhode Island. That is what's coming up next here at Locked On Golden Gophers. First, let's talk about our friends over at FanDuel because I love sports, you love sports, we love them so much that we never want them to stop. Now, luckily, we've got the Olympics going on. You've got the WNBA that will pick back up after the Olympics. You've got the MLB in full swing and so much more. So now is the time to continue to get in on the action when it comes to making sports bets because FanDuel lets you keep the sports going whenever you want. And if you aren't interested in Olympic sports, you're not interested in MLB or any of the sports that are actively playing in this time of the season, you can start getting your bets in for the upcoming NFL season, for the upcoming college football season, and so much more. And you can dream up bets anytime you are in the mood. All you got to do is go to FanDuel.com. And at FanDuel.com, they are hooking you up each and every single day. Every single customer is being offered a boost or a bonus on the daily. So that's right. There's something for everyone every single day, all summer long. So go to FanDuel.com or FanDuel.com overall and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball and the official sports betting partner of Locked On. All right, Gophers fans, remember to tap into Locked On Minnesota Sports for 24/7 streaming of your favorite Minnesota sports teams, from the Wild to the Gophers to the Vikings to the Timberwolves and so much more. You've always got constant updates and a 24/7 streaming channel over at Locked On Minnesota Sports. We also do live after game, immediate game reactions for the Gophers football team. So you're going to want to tap in there. Last year, it was Ron Johnson, myself, and Luke Inman. We'll see if that's the crew again, but overall, it's going to be a good time. And moving forward from that, once you hit subscribe there, be sure to hit subscribe here, because we are your go-to for Gophers daily content. Now we're jumping back into our series where we're behind enemy lines and we're breaking down the opponents for the Gophers season. Today, we're on week 2. We're talking about the Rhode Island football squad. And look, it all starts with their head coach, Jim Fleming. He's entering his 11th season as a head coach, and he is 31-62 thus far as a head coach. Now you hear that record and you're like, whew, that's pretty rough. I mean, how did he keep his job that long? And I get that thinking. But in the last 3 years since COVID, he's had a lot of success. He had a 7-4 season, a 7-4 season, and then he had a 6-5 season last year. So that's 3 straight seasons of winning seasons for that Rhode Island program that hasn't been used to winning so much. Now, it feels like they've been figuring it out as of late, putting things together. But prior to that, the team had 1 6-win season prior to COVID, and then a bunch of 1, 2, 3-win years in Jim Fleming's first few years as the coach. Now, Fleming's success with the team academically has been very impressive, but it's now starting to show itself on the field. Now, those 2 7-win seasons were some of the most wins for the program in the last 17 to 18 years. So he's got this ship turned in the right direction. 3 straight winning seasons in a row, like I had said. So we'll see if he can continue to build on those successes, but they have struggled a bit when it comes to Power 5 opponents. We'll talk about that in a bit. But moving to the offensive coordinator, we've got Patrick Murphy. I believe he's going on year 5. Both him and the defensive coordinator started their 3rd season in 2022, according to the website. So that means they came out at the same time and they're still going at the same time. Now, he had 4 all-conference selections in 2021, which is a great positive for this team. But he also helped his quarterback last year pass for over 3,000 yards passing. And that's something the Gophers haven't done since 2019. So it's an impressive stat in its own right. And it shows that this offense can get going if they have the right pieces. Now, his first season with the team, they were 3rd in their conference in points per game. And he coached the rookie of the conference when it comes to that. Plus, he coached at Holy Cross prior to Rhode Island. Now, the defensive coordinator is Chris Laurenti. He also is going to year 5, like I had mentioned. He coaches linebackers, and there wasn't a whole lot of info on him. So that's the gist of what I've got for you. I think that their defense has a lot of question marks. Offense has some potential if they have the right players. But let's talk about those players, talking about the impact transfers coming into the program. You've got Greg Gaines, a wide receiver coming from Iowa State and transferring to Rhode Island. They need some wide receiver help as they lost their best weapon last year, who had over 1,000 receiving yards. Greg Gaines will look to hopefully continue that trend. Being from Iowa State, being a power conference type player, going to Rhode Island, he's definitely a potential starter for this team. Then you've got Tyler Baker, a quarterback. I think he's more of a depth piece or a future piece. He comes from Navy, so he didn't get a lot of time. Actually, I don't think he got any time with Navy, but he's definitely a guy who had a lot of production in high school, impressive numbers overall. So I think he could be a guy for the future of this Rhode Island program. But they also brought in another quarterback to likely start this upcoming season. That's Hunter Helms. He's a quarterback from Clemson, and he's coming from that ACC powerhouse. Now, obviously, he hasn't played because their last 3 quarterbacks have been Trevor Lawrence, DJ Uiagalelei, and Cade Klubnik. And he has been there in that time. I believe he was 2020 to last season or 2022, one of the two. So he has been waiting in the wings or practicing in the wings, but never really the guy to be next up. Now he's looking for his chance to shine, and he could definitely step up and start for Rhode Island. Then you've got Thomas Buxton and Jordan Cooper, both offensive linemen, one coming from Stonehill, the other from Northwestern State. You've got a running back in Malik Grant coming from Sacred Heart. He could be a potential starter. Defensive lineman Carson Primrose coming from Sacred Heart. He could be a potential starter. And Arsheen Giles, a cornerback from Sacred Heart. He could also be a potential starter. That's 3 players I just listed that all came from Sacred Heart. Heart. They were all conference players at Sacred Heart, and they have another player who transferred from Sacred Heart as well. So a lot of transfers coming in that could maybe make immediate impact. Now, when we're breaking down the depth chart, looking at the offensive side of things, like I said, Hunter Helms is probably the most likely to be the starter coming from a power program of Clemson. He saw action in 9 games during his 4 years at Clemson. He went 23 of 37 for 218 yards. Then you've got Tyler Baker, the transfer from Navy, and he hasn't played yet. He had solid high school production, but more like a guy for the future. Now you move to the running back room. Last year, they had a leading rusher in Jaden McKenzie, who had 129 attempts, 847 yards, and 13 touchdowns, an elite PFF grade of an 88.1. He's gone. So that is a whole lot of production leaving that room. Now, luckily, they have their receiving back coming back in Gabe Sloat. He's back. He took 82 carries for 225 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground last year, but he also was a big-time productive running back when it comes to catching the ball for them. 34 targets, 25 receptions. He's back and will be a complimentary back for sure in this room. But they have 2 running backs to keep in mind that could step up that were with the program prior. Both saw about 40 carries last season. One being Deion Silas from Iowa State. He transferred a year ago, but he comes from Iowa State. And then Jaden Griffin, who has been with the team. Both saw around 40 carries last season. But they also have transfer from Sacred Heart, Malik Grant, who I just mentioned. He's probably the most likely to step into that Jaden McKenzie role, in my opinion. Now, last year, Malik Grant had 724 rushing yards last year, so he's one of those bruising backs who could step into that role and complement Sloat in the backfield. Now you move to the wide receiver position. I mentioned transfer from Iowa State, Gregory Gaines. He'll likely be a starter for this team, and they're going to want him to have immediate impact. Their second most productive receiver, Marquise Buchanan, is also back. Last year, he had 42 receptions for 638 yards and 4 touchdowns. Not bad numbers, especially for a wide receiver 2 on the team. Now, those 2 will likely leave the room, but they're still going to have hope that other names will step up, whether they're younger or other transfers like Sean Harris from UMass. They're going to need a couple more guys to step up to be able to spread the ball around and contribute. Now, tight end is not a big factor in this offense whatsoever. They have both of their tight ends who had the most production last year back, but that production was minimal. 4 receptions, 43 yards for Kevin Schaefer. He was the most productive tight end. And then you had Brady Rourke, who had 3 receptions for 25 yards. Safe to say tight ends really aren't used as a weapon in this Rhode Island offense. Then finally, on the offensive side of things, you've got the offensive line. They're returning 2 starters with over 600 snaps, left guard Adam McCanna and right tackle Brock Bethia. Neither graded particularly well when it came to the PFF gradings in any category, pass blocking, run blocking, or overall offensive grade. So even though they have a lot of production returning in those 2, it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be able to hold their own, especially against a power conference school when they struggled against the non-power conference teams last year. Now, having returning starters is always a bonus, but like I said, a little bit of a caveat with those 2 names, in my opinion. They also have Jacob Otts, who is the only other lineman with over 100 snaps returning. He will look to try and battle for a starting spot. But then they've got Jordan Cooper, who was the right guard for Northwestern State. He was the starter for that team, and he will look to claim that position here. That could clear up the guard spots for them. And they have a tackle in Brock Bethia, meaning you just have to fill the center and the left tackle. So we'll see what happens on the offensive line. But the offense lost all of their high production players last year at quarterback, at receiver, at offensive line, at running back. So this will likely be a rough outing for a Rhode Island team, though it is a positive that they landed some former power conference players to potentially help. You flip it to the defensive side of ball, and being an FCS school, it's really hard to gather collective defensive stats compared to FBS. So what I will say is this from their defensive success last season. They forced 5 fumbles. They had 2 fumbles recovered. They had 9 interceptions, 0 defensive touchdowns, and 8 total sacks. So it wasn't a game-changing defense. It was a defense that was trying to just stop the bleeding. It was a defense that was just trying to get off the field, but it wasn't a game wrecker. It wasn't a defense that capitalizes in making you make errors and mistakes and capitalizing on those turnovers. Now, they had 8 players with 20-plus tackles last season, and only one of those players returns. That's linebacker AJ Penna. And now Penna was their highest-graded player on the defense with an 81.7, which is a really good grade. So they definitely love having him back. They had 17 players on this defense last year that had 2 200 or more snaps last season. And of those 17 players, only 6 return. That's AJ Penna, who is the edge, Gabe Salmons, who is also another edge. Both of those two played over 600 snaps as starters. Fred Malay was a cornerback who played 450 snaps as an occasional starter. Wesley Neal Jr., an interior defensive line, was the starter, 400 snaps. And then you had Braden Price, a cornerback with 340 snaps, and Emmanuel Gomez, 232 snaps as a safety. Both of those two were occasional starters for this team. So overall, a lot of defensive replacements needed, and that could be a massive downside for this Rhode Island team taking on a power conference school in week 2. Now, lastly, we're going to look at their 2024 class commits, and Rhode Island had a few early enrollees that could actually be guys that could make an impact in their freshman season, in my opinion. The first is a 4-year high school starter in Terrell Spruill, who is 6'3", 250-pound defensive lineman. He could compete right away, and he also had a lot of power conference offers. So I'm curious to see why Rhode Island was the choice, whether it was academically or staying close to home or what have you. I'm not sure, but it's interesting because he had offers from Florida, Iowa State, Indiana, Arkansas, West Virginia, and Tennessee. So it begs the question, why Rhode Island? Then the other freshman I could see maybe making an impact right away, Jamari Thomas, a defensive back from Tampa, Florida. He had 89 career tackles, 7 interceptions, and 3 blocked field goals in his high school career, and he passed up on an opportunity from Penn State. So overall, 2 players that had some power conference looks, especially from some big programs that could immediately play and make a big impact for this team, both on the defense, like I said, that needs to find some answers. So overall, Rhode Island is a massive underdog, and I don't think this game should be particularly close, but we're going to discuss what the strengths, the weaknesses, and the make or break for this matchup is coming up next. First, I want to talk to you about our friends over at Ibata, because Ibata is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop and earn hundreds on items from groceries to beauty supplies and even toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you are purchasing. On top of that, you can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. So it's your time to join over 50 million users and use the Ibata app to earn cash back every time you shop. And for me, Labor Day is coming up. Labor Day means it's time to get on the barbecue. It's time to make that good grub, and that's what you can do. You can go get your barbecue food, get all your seasonings, your spices, your meats, and whatnot, and get cash back for all of those purchases before you celebrate the end of the summer and the beginning of football season. So definitely give the Ibata app a try. Right now, Ibata is offering our listeners at Locked On Golden Gophers $5 for trying the Ibata app by using code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Again, just go to the App Store or Google Play Store, download the free Ibata app to start earning cash back, and then use promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $5 instantly to your account. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege. Now, I also got to talk about our friends over at Factor, because look, your boy has been busy this summer. I'm not always in the mood or have the time to make a meal, but Factor Meals takes that off my plate, because these warm, sunny days are calling. And when it's not work, when it's not podcasting, when it's not spending time with the family, it's trying to figure out where I can find time in the day. And Factor Meals helps me save on some of that time and have a time to breathe or watch a TV show or check out that new EA Sports NCAA 25. So definitely you're going to want to give it a try, because it's Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved, and they're ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. On top of that, they help you meet your wellness goals. So make your day delicious from breakfast to dessert, and stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. Keep the kitchen time to a minimum. Factor meals are ready, like I said, in 2 minutes. No shopping, no prepping, no cooking, and no cleaning up, which definitely has to be the best part of all that. Enjoy effortlessly, support your lifestyle. On top of that, you can choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply just eat well balanced. Head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50, and you can use promo code lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus another 20% off your next month. Again, that's Locked On College 50 at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50, and you'll get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. Check them out at Factor Meals today. All right, Gophers fans, we are wrapping up today's show by talking about the strengths, the weaknesses, and the potential make or break for this Rhode Island matchup in week 2. Now, when you're talking about the strengths of this Rhode Island team, I think AJ Penna is a rock solid edge, and having 2 starting edge returners to try and create pressure and to bring experience to this defense is definitely a strength for any program. To bring back 2 really experienced edge rushers like that, hoping to continue to capitalize on opportunities and improve their numbers. Now, on top of that, I think they have some versatility in the run game. They've got a reliable receiving back. They've got some different ground and pound options, younger and a transfer or experienced transfer in Malik Grant of Sacred Heart. So I think they have a lot of options in that running back room. And then they brought in a good mixture of transfers, and it has a winning streak going. So overall, they would love to continue to add to that winning streak, but also to add a power win to that winning streak. Now, on the flip side, the weaknesses, they have no quarterback with consistent experience. They lost their best wide receiver, quarterback, running back, 3 offensive linemen, and 11 of their most used defensive players last year, 11 of their 17 most used defensive players. There's a huge talent gap between Rhode Island and Minnesota, plain and simple, and they have too much new and lack of chemistry for me to think that they have a shot in this game. Now, you add all of that together, those are all weaknesses, but I think the biggest weakness is their last power conference games in the last 10 years have all been blowouts. You're talking about 2021, they lost to Pitt by 21. 2019, they lost to Virginia Tech by 17. 2016, they lost to Kansas, who was not the Kansas of today, by 49 points. And then in 2015, they lost to Syracuse by 47 points. So every time they've played a power conference opponent, it has been a multiple score loss. And I think that could continue for them against Minnesota. Now, the make or break in 2024 for this game is that this team is definitely a team Minnesota should blow out, plain and simple. And this is a team that Max Brosmer last season with New Hampshire passed for over 400 yards on. So that was prior to them having major defensive losses. And that's prior to Max Brosmer having D1 FBS quality caliber wide receivers. All Big Ten conference wide receiver in Daniel Jackson, and some big time offensive linemen that can handle the pressures and the issues that Rhode Island's defense would throw at New Hampshire. It's not going to be the same against Minnesota. So Max Brosmer is a huge factor in this because he's already has some comfortability against this Rhode Island team. But the biggest thing is, can Minnesota break their trend? This would normally be a game where Minnesota could play it safe and run the ball a million times and play solid defense while still getting a blowout win, a la Eastern Michigan last year. That said, this should be the time where Minnesota aims to get into the passing game, get it flowing both this week and the next week against Nevada in preparation to give their best shot at Iowa in week 4 at home. So we'll see if Minnesota can break the trend of just running the ball and keeping it safe against lower caliber schools, or if they can really take the top off and get the passing game comfortable and going in preparation for the bigger matchups that are soon to follow. Now, power conference players transferring in is a plus, and they have some really talented freshmen that could bring hope if Minnesota can't take care of the ball. But aside from almost a miracle, I think this game should be a blowout. And that's kind of wrapping up our week 2 outlook for Rhode Island. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Let me know if you think that I'm being too positive when it comes to this one, or if I'm not giving it even if this should be a bigger blowout than what I'm saying. I love to hear your thoughts. I love to hear your questions and more. And tomorrow we're going to talk about the Nevada Wolfpack in the week 3 matchup for the Gophers. Should it be an easy win? We'll dive into it tomorrow. I'll see you then. Row the boat, Sky Go Gophers, as always. And please don't forget to hit subscribe.